A good day to one and all, no matter where you may be. Kirk, it's my pleasure to be with you here today on Observations.
And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
We're going to begin a journey that is going to consume considerable amount of time, but this is the first of our systematic kind of beginning to end review of the book known today as Isaiah. It's actually Yahowah or Yashayahu. It's written both ways in the text. It means salvation is from Yahowah. And so what I wanted to do, because there was a method to the madness, if you will, of writing observations. We started on Proverbs 6, which specifically denounces Paul and Pauline Christianity, and was written from a father to his son. This would be our Heavenly Father to the children of the covenant, to tell them what things God expressly despises, who he hates, and what we ought to do if we don't want to fall victim to religion. And from there we went to the 7th chapter of 2 Samuel, and we presented what God had to say about religion. Specifically, as he talked about, and God doesn't much differentiate between religion and government.
No.
He looks at them as really being the same foe, that religion and government have always been integrated throughout history, and they are control mechanisms over his people that limit their freedoms and deceive and enrich themselves unfairly. So we considered what God had to say about religion in the first book of Samuel. Then we went from there to what God had to say specifically about government. And he had those 12 scathing comments about,
if you want a king,
you want a ruler, this is what you're going to get. And you're going to get constant war. He's going to, your sons are going to die. Your daughters are going to be abused. You're going to be taxed into oblivion, all to create this, massive enterprise that satiates the desires strictly of the king. From there, we went into Proverbs 7, which is written really as a partner to Proverbs 6, and there God specifically delineates the way that the whore of Babylon disguises herself. It's actually the adversary disguises himself or herself, depending on how you want to look at the metaphor, to deceive billions of people. And in Proverbs 7, God specifically names Paul as the principal spokesperson for the whore of Babylon. And so once we had finished his specific denunciations of Paul, we turned to Chabauk and went through the second chapter of Chabauk, actually first and second chapters of Chabauk, where God specifically also calls out Paul by name and calls him the plague of death, so that we'd understand that this is an overall theme of God.
Yeah. Everywhere you go, plague of death.
Yeah. So the purpose of turning to Yahowah at this point is that there is the connections between the whore Babylon, and Satan and religion. So those things, the whore, Satan, Babylon, and religion are all connected in Yahowah. As you move through the first 14 chapters of Yahowah, God systematically explains that the whore is the whore of Babylon, and that the whore of Babylon is in fact Satan, and that the institution that Satan establishes to manifest himself as the whore of Babylon, or to work as the whore of Babylon, he actually does it to be seen as the Lord God, is religion. That's the mechanism. And so it's all laid out for us in Isaiah, and that's why we've turned to Isaiah now to view that. So what I'd like to do, Kirk, is something we don't very often do, but I want to systematically explain why we're turning to Isaiah, when it was written, why the timing of its writing was interesting, to put it into the context of the history of Israel, because that's the thing that God cares the most about, and that's what he's writing about through this prophet. And then to explain what other things are kind of going on at this time. So we really have a framework to understand this, because there's some things that are said early on that are really, really troubling. I mean, it just grabs your heart and squeezes.
Yeah. If you don't see America in all these passages, if you don't see the church in all these passages, then something's wrong with your head.
That is correct. I mean, that's correct. And God's, for those who would say, God's not specifically mentioned, that's not true. Yeah, that's not true. That is just not true. Like when he speaks of the merchants of Tarshish, and how the merchants of Tarshish in the last days will be so detrimentally influential in the world. And when you drill down to figure out, and we will as we go through this, you drill down to figure out who they were at that time and what they did at that time, to have them be the metaphor, the symbol for a country that will mirror their nature in the last days. There's only one country that matches them, and we'll find out. That's the United States.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, those of us in the English frame, we have to remember that all these verbs are not set in time, or no prophecy has to be true.
For all time.
Past, present, and for all time. Yes, yeah, so he's not, even though this may be associated with Assyria or something else at one time or another, it's also very much this day that we live in as well. So.
Correct. Yes, as a matter of fact, most of it is pointed to our time.
Yes, I see that. I can't imagine anyone can see otherwise, but just for the skeptics.
Yeah, and there's another aspect of it, too, that is interesting, is that there'll be people that read it today, read these words, and they'll think that, okay, God is speaking out against Judaism. Well, Christianity replaced Judaism, so we don't like Judaism either, so we agree with God. No, knit to Judaism. But he wasn't speaking about Judaism.
No, it wasn't there.
Yeah, what didn't exist? There was no such religion then. No. We're talking in the 8th century BCE, Judaism as a religion didn't really manifest itself until the time of the Maccabees. And so you're looking more at its initiation maybe around 400 BCE, but really playing into, really right around 200 BCE is when Judaism actually emerges in its various forms as a religion, and it came out in really 3 forms: the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Essenes. Yeah, those were the 3 forms of Judaism that emerged during the occupation of Alexander the Great's descendants, not really descendants, but the four generals, as they carved up the territory that Alexander had conquered, their control over and influence on Israel is what caused rabbinic Judaism to grow. And today there's only one surviving form of the religion, the
Pharisaical.
And that's the Pharisaical form of the religion. The rabbinical form of the religion is all that exists today. But this was 500 years before Judaism existed. So the religion that's being described here is a variation of the Babylonian religion. In fact, it's not even a significant variation. It's the same names, the same characters, the same gods, the same terminology, the same festivals. Everything about the religion that God is denouncing here is Babylonian. And the most Babylonian religion on the planet today
is Catholic, the Roman Catholic.
Yes, correct.
Or Christianity in general.
Christianity in general, right. Roman Catholicism specifically, and Christianity in general. And you might say, well, that's a stretch. No, it isn't. And the reason it's not a stretch is that God specifically tells us in Daniel that out of Babylon will come the Persians. And out of the Persians, they will ultimately be defeated by Alexander and the Greeks, and that Alexander and the Greek Empire would be defeated by Rome.
Right.
And each of these beasts and their beasts, which means they're satanic in terms of their religion and their government, would grow progressively worse, but really all evolving one out of another from Babylon until at the end, Imperial Rome, which God denounces is horrific. And I wrote an entire chapter covering the viciousness of Imperial Rome so that people would understand the history of Rome and how, there's this grandeur of Rome delusion in people's eyes. Rome is
the romantic side of it, not romantic.
Yeah, the most despicable culture, nation in human history was Rome. It's just in every imaginable bad thing the Romans did. And if you question that, I would encourage you to read, open the 7th chapter of Yahowah.com, and it's free. Read it and get an eyeful as to what Imperial Rome was. But God said that's not the worst of the beast. He said out of Imperial Rome comes the worst beast, and that's the beast that will survive right to the end days, the last days, and that beast would trample upon the whole world.
And there's only one candidate for that.
The Roman Catholic Church. And I wrote an entire chapter that talks about the transition from Imperial Rome to the Roman Catholic Church, and it was not consummated by Constantine, which everybody thinks, but by Theodosius. Who was both the Pope and the Emperor of Rome. And he was the last Pope and Emperor of Rome when Rome was still united, although he would rule out of Constantinople.
Right.
And so
he's controlling both sides, yeah.
Right. So while Yahowah describes America using, must be 50 different insights that leave no other choice but America as the country that is most to blame for the divestiture of Israel, for severing the nation at the waist and making it vulnerable to the Muslims and supplying the Muslims with the weapons that they would wield against Israel. And God goes out of his way to express his disdain for this country, the United States. You'd have to be blind not to see Roman Catholicism and therefore Christianity and the United States in these words.
Yeah. There are no other candidates.
No, there aren't. We're it. That does not make, other places good, like South and Central America.
Hanging right with us, and the Muslim world is going right after them, doing it. And, China's no better, and Russia's no better either.
Yep. So the most prolific of Yahowah's prophets was aptly named, Salvation is from Yahowah. Isn't it a shame that religious scholars, and just scumbags of individuals, saw fit to change the names of people that God had inspired to speak for him?
And so that we know what they're talking about.
Right.
I mean, the story is in the name.
Right. If in fact you knew that the book was scribed by Yahowah, you would know that he bore Yahowah's name, and that Yahshua is one of the most common of all Hebrew verbs. Means to save.
Right.
Salvation is from Yahowah. You lose that if you revert to Isaiah. Why do that? I mean, there is not a single there's not a single Hebrew scholar in the world today that doesn't know that the man's name was Yahshua.
Yeah. You can look him up on the lexicon. Right. That's what it says.
I mean, the only difference between Yahushua, which every scholar in the world knows is the actual name of the person who was changed to be Jesus. The only difference between Yahshua and Yahusha is that the order of the name and the verb are reversed.
Right.
Yahweh saves, salvation is from Yah.
Well, how about also, just a little aside, these translators seem to get all of the names for Satan and all the bad guys right.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's such a slap in the face. I want to kill him myself.
I agree. Yeah. They only goof on once with Satan. Hasatan is the Hebrew word for adversary, and so they use Satan as like it's a name, and it's not a name. Satan is a title. But twice in this book, and a book named "Salvation is from Yahowah," Yahshua. Satan is named. The adversary is named. It's Hillel ben Shakar. And they changed it to Lucifer.
Right there, right.
Yeah. I mean, oh goodness. Okay, so Yahshua spoke of it was the fleeting vestiges of Israel, delineating what the northern kingdom had done to anger God and to engender their own annihilation at the hands of the Assyrians. Yahshua's, Isaiah's message, was also for those who would listen in Yahudah, Judah. Fortunately, they did. They would even recover, although for a short period of time, because one of their kings discovered a copy of the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
He read it.
Yes, he did.
And he and his nation, Yahudah, the southern part of the kingdom, was rejuvenated by observing its guidance, enjoying its century.
Passover in history.
Yeah, that's right. They did. They just had so much fun, they doubled the length. And they enjoyed a century of peace and prosperity as a result. 2 weeks of celebration, you got a century of peace. It's a pretty good deal.
Pretty good deal.
Pretty good deal. And they even they stretched it 2 weeks, so they were having so much fun.
Yeah.
Beyond these people, Yahshua's prophetic pronouncements were scribed for us in the present day, and for what will soon befall the chosen people, both good and bad, all in our immediate future. Now, the reason we can say that without any speculation is that there are huge swaths of Yahshua's prophetic testimony that deal with events playing out right before our eyes. Like Yahshua 17 speaks of the Syrian war that's going on right now,
right,
and the aftermath of the Syrian war, and who the belligerents are in the civil war, and who is arming the belligerents in the Syrian war, and what's ultimately going to happen as a result of that. And by the way, it's not just the term that Yahowah uses for Syria. Literally meant Greater Syria, and so it includes Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Jordan, and other countries in that
as well.
Right. So, and it specifically talks about that the triggering event that's going to really bring all of this into focus is that ultimately Damascus is going to fall and become a heap of rubble. And once it falls, all hell breaks loose.
Or even better, a twisted heap of rubble.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, what Yahowah is telling us is the same thing that we should have learned from our invasion of Iraq or our invasion of Libya.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that dictators, while bad, and Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi were horrendous people.
Sure.
But if you're not careful and you depose a dictator, no matter how bad they are, if you don't know what the majority of the people think and are like and are likely to do, then you put yourself in a position where you get something much worse. And we got something much worse in Libya. We got something much worse in Iraq. And so that was the consequence of replacing a tyrant with a religious government. So this is very serious. And God is saying the same thing about us. What's going to happen when we impose, for example, where the United States is in opposition to Assad, the president of Syria, not recognizing that what happened in Iraq, what happened in Libya, will happen in Syria, and is going to happen in Syria when Assad is opposed.
Spread to all the other countries right around.
Correct. That's exactly what's going to happen. And God tells us, that's what's going to happen. You Americans are so stupid. You're going to go and remove 3 dictators from power, and you're going to turn those 3 countries into hellholes for Islamic terrorism. That's what he tells us. And he says no Not holding anything back. It's unambiguous. So as a result of finding a complete 2,200-year-old scroll of Yahowah, nestled between the Dead Sea and Jerusalem, fortuitously protected inside of masonry vessels in the caves among Qumran, we have access to a text that predates the deliberate and rather sinister corruptions of Judaism and of Christianity. It provides absolute proof that God exists, that his name is Yahowah, and that he authored the words that we're going to consider. Now, while much of what Yahowah inspired his prophets to write is painful to consider, especially as God laments about what religion and politics have done to corrupt his children, his awe-inspiring prophecies punctuate his treatise on the darkness of man with overwhelmingly powerful overtures that will enrich and enlighten the willing. The message about to be unfurled before our eyes is at times depressing, but also uplifting, because for every affliction there is an answer. And sadly, even though the benefits of Yahowah's covenant are beyond our wildest imaginings, there be very few takers. And for centuries, according to God, there were none. God couldn't find a single person to work with. And God's criterion for people to work with isn't very high.
No. Case in point.
Yeah, absolutely. It ain't very high.
For God.
He said, but there's none. There's none. Throughout the prophetic text and over the course of 2,700 years of human history, past, present, and future, Yahowah introduces us to the world's most formidable adversary. He systematically reveals and speaks about the role of the whore of Babylon and how this whore of Babylon misleads his children so that they not only rebel against him, but they actually come to worship Satan as if he were God. Now, Yahowah does a marvelous job of pulling all this together for Yahuwah in the concluding chapters of Revelation. And we're going to consider what is said there, because the case between Satan, Babylon, the whore, and religion are very succinctly brought together when Yahowah summarizes what we're going to read here over the course of these 14 chapters of Yahowah. Now, this not only talks about Satan positioning himself to be worshipped as God, and he is the God of Christianity. Satan is the God of Islam. Yeah, the sinful nature which is presented here is very reminiscent of our own. And it's compared to Sodom and Gomorrah. Yahowah bluntly states that their religious prayers and their offerings are absolutely worthless. He views them as an abomination.
Boy, staggering.
It's staggering. All this, they had this terrible tragedy down there in Orlando, and everybody, the first thing they say, yeah, we ought to pray. Pray for the families. Pray for the victims, pray for the families. Why would you pray for anybody? I mean, what good is that going to do? First of all, God doesn't even hear the prayers of those who are not part of the covenant. And those who are part of the covenant know there's absolutely nothing you can do for those people or for their families.
No.
Nothing. The killer was religiously motivated, and yet the focus of the nation is on guns. It's just mind-bogglingly
stupid. If you took all the guns away from all the Muslims in the world, would they still kill each other?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that being the case, I wouldn't do what America is doing and send billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of advanced weaponry to the Islamic nations.
But the point is, if people are motivated to kill you, they'll take a knife, they'll take a rock.
Yeah.
It started with Cain and Abel. They'll take a rock and just kill you.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. You don't need a gun to do it. So throughout this prophetic text, we are going to see that the misguided notion that somehow Judaism is being assailed by God and he's giving up on his chosen people. It's just not the case. Judaism did not exist. Their political and religious presumptions of that God is discussing are actually pervasive today in the West. And this should be especially alarming to Christians. And that the religion of Christianity was inspired by these exact same influences. I mean, there are 100 things that we could share with you that are essential to Christianity that were born and bred in Babylon. Sunday worship, Easter, Christmas, Lent, the Trinity, steeples, crosses, a God called the Lord.
Yeah.
All of it. It's all Babylonian.
Paid clergy, by the way.
Yep.
On and on and on. Steeples.
Mm-hmm. God is unequivocal, explicitly condemning religious opposition to his Torah. What is the most religiously opposed institution in the world today vis-a-vis the Torah?
Oh, that would be against it. It would be the Christianity.
Yeah, Pauline Christianity. Yeah, the Quran claims to confirm the Torah. No, it doesn't. It's the antithesis of the Torah. But that's just so stupid.
It's not a good argument.
But Paul specifically condemns the covenant and the covenant and the Torah.
Yeah.
Saying that it's incapable of saving anyone. It enslaves. It's of the flesh. It's ruinous.
Yeah.
So continuing his assaults on the mind-numbing aspects of human rhetoric and resulting beliefs, Yahowah introduces the cure. His Torah and his Son, the latter walking out of the pages of the former. Through his prophet, Yahowah ascribes religious rebellion to a perverted and duplicitous whore. By the time we reach the 13th and 14th chapters, this adversarial religious harlot is linked directly to Babylon and then directly to Satan himself. This systematic progression from Sodom to Babylon, from rebellion to religion, from worthless prayers and offerings to the adversary, leads to announcing the name of the author of these corruptions, adroitly delineating the reason Satan conceived and advanced religion to beguile the preponderance of people throughout the ages into worshiping the devil as their Lord. Now, when we began Observations as our time, listening to Yahowah explain why he hates the advocates of religion and the proponents of politics and why he considers them to be an abomination for having discounted and discarded his Torah, I'm reminded that so many people, every time there's a horrible incident in the world, they come out and say, well, all of this was because of hate.
Mm-hmm.
Hate is what caused Orlando. No, it didn't. It's a lack of hate. Caused Orlando.
You gotta hate the right thing.
Right. It's because the vast preponderance of people have not yet come to hate the religion that inspired those acts.
Yeah.
And if you don't hate that which promotes that kind of viciousness, if you don't hate that which promotes kidnapping and an enslavement of children and of rape and of pedophilia and of jihad and of terrorism, then you are destined to endure the consequence. We don't hate enough is the reason Orlando occurred. It's not because of hate. So that's what we learned, that God hates religion for the exact same reason we ought to hate it.
Right.
Now, the second chapter, we specifically focused on God's denunciation of religion. In the third, we listened to him excoriate government. Oh, boy, this idea of God bless America, you have to be a nincompoop to think that God is blessing any country, much less America. In the fourth chapter, Yah told us that he would support and enable our willingness to criticize these human institutions, protecting us from them as a process. Yeah, in my summary of this earlier in this program, I forgot to mention that. We devoted an entire chapter to this 91st Psalm, where God is specifically saying, if you're willing to do what I want done, which is to expose and condemn religion and speak of my testimony, I'll protect you.
Indeed he does.
As we press forward in observations for our time, we discovered that the 5th chapter, that the whore of religion worked directly with Shaul, with Paul, the founder of Christianity, to lure the ignorant and the irrational to their death. That's not me being pejorative. That's what God says. Now, over the course of the next several chapters, we're going to consider how Yahowah makes the connection between the whore and religion, between religion and Babylon, and between Babylon and Satan. This will invariably lead to the recognition that the religion God views as the most lethal is the Babylonian, Satanic, Pauline, and Roman faith of Christianity.
Wow. I know this is true. I've been for years, but wow, every time you hear it, you just... In our culture, that just should blow people away.
All these people that think they're being godly by going to their church, and they're praying to their Jesus, and they have their crosses. If they only knew that that is the religion that God despises most of all. You know, when people tell me, you hate Islam, and you're just not being fair because there's problems with Christianity, and I say, well, actually, Islam isn't the religion I hate the most.
No,
I hate Christianity far more than I hate religion. Islam. I mean, Islam is more vicious, but Christianity is responsible for damning far more souls.
More dead souls than anything.
Correct. And with Christianity, the lie is sophisticated.
Yeah.
With Islam, it's just stupid. If you're a Muslim, it's too bad. I mean, it's just, I don't even pity you. It is so obviously false that if you want to play Muslim, you go right ahead. You're way too dumb for me to waste any breath. Now, in the 7th volume of Yahowah, which I referenced earlier, we discovered that the most vicious beast in human history evolved from Babylon to become Imperial Rome, and then trampled the world underfoot as the Roman Catholic Church. Now we're about to discover that Christianity generally, and Roman Catholicism specifically, is the whore of Babylon, Satan's principal means of beguiling the religious into worshiping him as their Lord. Satan's sweeping account of the history of his people. Yahowah's sweeping account of the history of his people. Of history of his people, including predictions regarding their future, was penned by Yeshayahu at a very turbulent time. Now, so that we approach this in context and appreciate the timing, 20 years earlier, in 760 BCE, Yonah, a name that's been corrupted to Jonah, had been sent to Nineveh. Nineveh still exists as a city, which was the birthplace of the beast. Nineveh was originally the capital of Babylon, named after Nin. You know what Nin is in the Akkadian languages that ultimately became Aramaic and became Babylon. You've heard of Nimrod, haven't you?
Oh yeah, Nimrod.
Yeah, okay. All right, so Ninus is named after Nimrod. Nimrod was a violent hunter against Yahowah.
First king.
Yeah, right. Semiramis is the wife. She is also called Astarte, or Astarte. Yahowah uses Astarte, Queen of Heaven, Mother of God, because one day old Nimrod, and Nimrod and Ninus mean the same thing. It means of the sun. So the man named of the sun goes and gets killed by a wild boar, and so he gets reborn because his wife, who is scripturally known as Astarte, becomes known as Venus and Isis. She claims that she is impregnated by the sun when the sun is in the constellation of Taurus the Bull, which is the Sunday closest to the spring equinox when Easter is celebrated now, so that 9 months later she could give birth to the son of the sun, and therefore become the mother of God, the Queen of Heaven, the Virgin with child.
Right. And I used to tell Christians this stuff long before I met you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, this is really what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them, this is what Christmas is a result of that.
Yeah, that is correct.
And on and on and on and on. And they would just say, I don't care what it means. I don't care what the truth is or what you are claiming. It ain't what it means to me. Yeah. Don't ruin my Christmas.
Right.
Don't ruin my Easter.
What it means to you is somewhere between irrelevant and condemning.
Yeah.
God says it's an abomination.
Yeah.
He says it's unbelievably stupid. It's the religion he despises the most. And if you're going to practice it, you just need to know the consequence. Yeah, you can have it mean whatever you want to you, but understand that all you're doing by celebrating any aspect of it is pissing God off.
Yeah.
You just might as well lay it out flat. You are absolutely precluding yourself from ever having a relationship with him, from him ever hearing anything you have to say, from you ever considering anything he has to say, from ever being part of the covenant or from entering the kingdom. So if you're willing to give all that up, then you can continue to celebrate Christmas. You can continue to celebrate Easter.
Halloween and a few other good ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Have at it. So Nineveh was named after the sun. The son of the sun. This is the birth of the concept of Christianity. It's the only religion that has the son of the sun born on the winter solstice, where the Trinity, the Mother of God, is impregnated 9 months earlier, celebrating Easter, which was actually named after the wife of Nimrod. And all of this it's being presented to have Jonah going to Nineveh, which is the birthplace of the beast, in order to awaken Gentiles to the message the Israelites had failed to proclaim. So in 750 BCE, Hoshea announced the divorce decree, telling the northern kingdom, known as Ephraim, that they had breached the covenant and were no longer God's children. Now this is interesting because what real-world device did Yahowah use to enable Hoshea to be a passionate spokesperson against religion? He asked Hoshea to do something.
Yeah, he married a whore.
Right. He
married a whore. Children.
Right. Gomer.
Special names. Yeah.
Right. He married a whore named Gomer, who was a temple prostitute. So the whore that he married was a religious whore. Mm-hmm. And by marrying a religious whore, at Yahowah's instructions, Hoshea could speak with authority. He could actually put the pathos, the actual feelings into the words. Yeah, feel the pain. It's why I'm grateful that I was so involved in Christianity. As an evangelist, as a Bible study teacher, as an ordained ruling elder, because of the fact I empathize with people who are beguiled by the religion. I mean, I'm in a position where I can say, this is where you've been hoodwinked. This is the consequence to you, because I've been there.
Yeah.
And that was the way that he did that with Hoshea. And Hoshea is really important here because the whore that he was asked to marry describes how when Yahowah uses the term of adultery and of being unfaithful, he is speaking of cheating on him and breaking the marriage vows of the covenant.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with sex. It has everything to do with relationships.
Right. You've destroyed it.
Correct.
Can't serve both.
So it's the northern kingdom that is divorced, known as Ephraim, because they had breached the covenant. They were no longer Yah's children. But he does say, there will become a time when you will say, Yahowah is our God, and I will say, you are my children. And that time is coming up on us pretty quickly. It's going to happen in 2033, year 6,000 Yah. So that time is fast approaching. Now, shortly after they had breached the covenant and were no longer Yah's children, the most complete and compelling presentation of God's people commenced with the opening salvo of Yahshua, and that began in 745 BCE. That's an important date to remember.
Mm-hmm.
745 BCE, announcing that Yahowah was currently in rebellion. This timing is interesting because the Torah was given to Moshe in 1445 BCE. How many years separate 1445 BCE and 745?
I think it's 700.
Yeah, it would be the number.
Big number,
700 years exactly. Yahowah is written exactly 700 years after the Torah is given.
Yeah, we don't miss a trick, does he?
Nope. But now I want you to look at what happened in 33 CE. Isn't that the time that Yahowah, in the year 4000 Yah, fulfilled the first four of the Moed Mikre?
Yes, sir.
How many years is it between 445 BCE and 33 CE, realizing you have to subtract one because there was no year
one,
zero.
One, yeah.
It went from year one to year one, BCE 1 to AD 1, so there's no year zero. So 745 to 33. How many years is that?
777.
777.
Amazing.
Yeah.
He's good.
Oh, he is good. I mean,
really
talk about. I mean, can you imagine the planning that has to go into having the most prolific prophet commence his testimony exactly 700 years after you hand down your Torah to Moshe, and exactly 777 years before you fulfill his promises.
Timing is everything.
No, it gives you goosebumps. I mean, it's just okay.
Cool.
Yeah, it's.
He weaves these little things in, so if you really want to look,
go,
wow.
Yeah, there's a treasure. It's a treasure for you if you're willing to look.
Mm-hmm.
If you're willing to think, I'm going to reward that.
Yes.
So, pretty cool. Also interesting when seen in the flow of time. 700 years from the 702 BCE conclusion of the prophetic testimony, Yahowah became the living embodiment of Yahowah's, for unto us a child is born, and unto our behalf a son is given.
Right.
It was from 702 BCE to 2 BCE, which is when Yahowah showed up, arrived as the child born to us. You have exactly 700 years. So there's a 700 years going backwards to the Torah, 700 years going forward to the birth that this prophetic revelation in the 6th chapter announces, and 777 years from the beginning of the book
Passover. Yeah.
to Passover, 33 CE.
Amazing.
It just is stunning. Now, just to add some greater dimension to this period, Assyria would destroy the rebellious northern kingdom, enslaving all but obliterating 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel circa 722 BCE is when that occurred. 7 years thereafter, in 716 BCE, Hezekiah would rediscover Yahweh's Torah, celebrating Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. 2 weeks late, but for twice the time. There's so many just little things in the Torah and prophets that are big things, and that's one of those things. It's a little thing, but I think is an enormous thing. The big thing is, okay, they became Torah observant again, and Yahowah did away with their foes. All of those Assyrians,
like you said,
right? He protected them. It's just like everything that we read that God says He's going to do. So that's the profound message. But the little message is that all these people that are fixated on, God is never imprecise. So you have to know exactly the day that each Mikre is to be celebrated.
And this is my thing to say no.
No, this is, because Hezekiah went to Yah. He says, we can't do this right on time. And the reason we can't do this right on time is that the whole concept of matzah, and Pesach and matzah are all just rolled into one. Matzah is Pesach, Pesach is matzah. They are, it's the same event. Leading to a Bakurim. And what matzah represents is separating ourselves distancing ourselves from religious and political sin.
Right.
And Yahowah And every place from the temple itself all the way through the entire countryside and every town and village of Yehuda was filled with religious idols,
Right.
false gods. And that's what he's trying to get rid of. The yeast is just a symbol for matzah. That's just a symbol. What the yeast symbolizes is religious and political corruption. And there was way too much of it. And so Hezekiah says, we can't celebrate this in time because we can't get rid of the yeast, all the religious imagery. He says, can I have a 2-week extension? Because I need also to train the Lowy, now called Levi, how to do this right. I don't have them trained yet, and I don't have the yeast out of the cupboards. So we'd like a couple of weeks to get our act together.
Yeah.
God said, fine. Got no problem with that. And that's okay.
And then they start celebrate Passover with the stuff,
right.
Yeah,
then they start celebrating. They're having such a good time. It's not a sacrifice. Having such a good time, they say, hey, can we do it another week?
Can we party some more?
Absolutely.
Party hardy.
So that happened, very shortly after this was written. It's this 716 BCE. In the process, and as a direct result, Yahowah saved Yehudah from the Assyrian conquest. However, then in 702 BCE, Yeshayahu concluded his prophetic revelation by affirming that Yehudah would become religious and rebellious again, predicting that as a result, Babylon would conquer and enslave them. Now, in the sequence of things, Nahum would serve as Yahweh's next prophet, rising to the occasion in 700 BCE. Zephaniah would follow 60 years hence in 640 BCE. Yirmiah, who was called to prophesy to Gentiles, commenced his revelation in 630, continuing to do so through 600 BCE. Simultaneously, Chabauk condemned Shaul, the founder of the Christian religion, circa 614 BCE, 666 years exactly before the self-proclaimed Apostle Paul penned his letter to the Gentiles. Yep, Galatians. It's interesting. I was reading some of the commentary about the kingdom. In the book of Acts, it begins with Yosha's last statement to his 11 remaining disciples. And in his last discussion with them, just before he was the Bekurim version of Yosha, was transformed back into light. Before that light was taken up into the clouds and then up into heaven off of Mount of Olives. He was talking to his disciples. The disciples, they asked, when is the kingdom returning to Yisrael? And he says, it's not for you to know. It's what the Father has decided to do. It's just not for you to know. I mean, what he's saying is, listen, it's going to happen 2,000 years from now. Nothing you can do or say is going to make any difference in anyone's life. Don't be concerned about that. That is well beyond your time. But then he said, what I want you to do is I want you to go to Jerusalem first, and then all of Judea and Samaria, and then to the entire world, and share what I have shared with you. Now, how in the world can Yosha, in his parting comments to those 11, say, I want you to go to the entire world to share my message? And Paul be right when he says that the disciples were limited to Jews and that he had the entire world.
And pretty much to Jerusalem.
So either Yosha is lying or Paul is lying.
Right.
One of the two.
We know the history. Matthew and Andrew are down in Egypt. We know that Thomas is reportedly going all the way to India.
Yeah.
We've got.
Let me ask you a question. Where did Yosha, the risen Yosha, meet with Yochanan?
Is in Greece, in the Greek land,
just outside of just outside of Ephesus, right?
Absolutely.
Where he commended the Ephesians for not listening to Paul and for listening to Yahowah. He didn't tell Yahowah, boy, you really need to get out of this place. I want you to go back home. You need to go back to Jerusalem because, I've given the rest of the world to Paul. No, he said exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
If you were thoughtful.
If we went to Rome, then that disputes everything. Paul didn't need to be there.
Correct.
Paul didn't need to be anywhere. He should have been stuck under a rock.
That's correct. So if you're at least a bit thoughtful about any of this, you'd realize that Paul is bogus. But anyway, 666 years before Paul penned his first letter to the Galatians is when Chabauk called him out by name and called him the plague of death. Ezekiel, Yachazel, followed it in 595 BCE, providing considerable insight into the next world conflict, the Magog War. And this will be a 2027 Islamic assault on Israel. This accounting of our future history began in Yahowah, with the prophet revealing in the 17th and 18th chapters that the war would begin in Greater Syria, that it would ultimately lead to the demise of Damascus, to the thinning of Israel at the waist by the forfeiture of the West Bank, to the Islamic terrorists, and to their invasion of Israel, all aided and abetted by none other than the political incarnation of Rome, the institution that also has a Senate, the institution where the head of state is also the head of the military.
Same architecture, too.
Same architecture. The United States of America. Just as Yahowah had foretold, Jerusalem would be sacked by the Babylonians beginning in 601 and continuing through 587 BCE. Daniel's sweeping prophetic vision of human history from that point forward, including how Babylon would morph into Persia, then Greece and Rome, and ultimately trample the whole world underfoot as the beast of the Roman Catholic Church, commenced in 580 BCE. It was actually scribed from inside the beast of Babel. He would continue to write through 540 BCE, ultimately giving way to Haggai and Zechariah in 520, during which time the temple was rebuilt. Nehemiah followed a century later in 445 BCE. Then the last of Yahowah's prophets, Malachi, presented a vivid portrayal of our immediate future, doing so in 430 BCE. Now there'd be nothing more from Yahowah during their ensuing 4 centuries.
And that's tragic.
The books ascribed to the Maccabees during this period provide a historical accounting of battles that were fought between the Jews and the Greeks over religion, over politics, and were not inspired by God. And the books which carry Enoch's name, which were compiled thereafter, are complete forgeries, with troubling similarities to the Quran, and almost as poorly written. So now that we understand the timing of Yahowah's open letter to humankind, let's dive in and listen to what he had to say. The Chazon began, and we're going to provide this in a quick summary, and then we'll dive into each word and analyze it more carefully. The revealing communication of Yashayahu, salvation is from Yahowah, son of Amos, the trustworthy and steadfast, whereby beneficially he compiled and revealed a written prophetic record of the covenant relationship concerning Yahudah, meaning related to Yah, and Jerusalem, the source from which teaching and guidance regarding reconciliation and restoration flow. In the days of Uzziah, boldness and empowerment are from Yah. Yotham, Yah was perfect. Akaz, he has grasped hold. And Yakis Yah, strengthened by Yahowah. Rulers of Yahudah, the beloved of Yahowah. Now it grounds these statements in recorded history, providing this history so we can do what we did at the beginning here. We know when these people came into power. And by knowing that, we're in a position to say, this is when this was written.
Right.
And then all we had to do is connect the dots to say, oh, man, that's profound. 700 years hence, 700 years from, 777 years separating.
Mm-hmm.
All comes from the fact that he gave us the timing.
Right.
Well, this is spiritual realm. And choose of your own accord to pay attention and respond, material realm, because Yahowah has spoken. Quote, I reared my children, lifting them up, helping them grow, and enabling them to be great. And I raised them, taking them to a higher place. But they have actually rebelled against me. A cow, one who looks, sees what's around him, and views the world from the proper perspective, is aware of and recognizes his creator, the one who gave him birth. And an ass, a stubborn domestic beast of burden, his Lord. Israel, individuals who struggle and fight with God, does not know and remains unaware. My people have failed to consider this connection, and thus they do not understand. Wow.
Wow, wow.
Can you imagine hearing that for the first time?
Hearing it correctly.
Oh my goodness! I mean, you'd be back on your heels. God just said that He did everything He could possibly do as a father for our benefit.
And you don't get it.
Yeah, and you tossed it all away.
Yeah. You know, we were talking about that this morning. Terry and I were doing some gardening, and I brought up a thing I read on George Bush and how they have. Basically, it sounds like they're trying to protect their legacies and their money and all that sort of thing. And I'm saying, no matter what these guys can get. I mean, I've always been, unfortunately, buy high and sell low.
Yeah.
But this is one time when we both agree that, you know, we paid almost nothing and won grand prize. I mean,
that's correct. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, it's the ultimate deal here is that it costs us nothing other than our time, and our time is rewarded, and we gain the universe.
There's nothing you can get out of all this other stuff. This just ain't there. You know?
I was going to say, time is kind of an investment. Everything you put in now, you get back later.
Oh, yeah. Then you get eternal time.
Yeah, eternal time. Yeah. You know, I've just been translating a bunch of conversations surrounding the relationship between the city of Dode, Yahowah's home, also on Zion, further up the ridgeline of Moriah, and what Yahowah had to say about the Dode. And, you know, what he said, you know, in eternity, you know where Dode's going to sit? Place of honor. Place of honor, right next to God. His home is right next to God's home, and his seat of honor is right next to God. And, you know, in my view, even though the Dode was a rascal, he earned it.
Yeah.
Don't envy him in the least, but man, I can't wait to continue to learn from him. If it wasn't for Dode, I wouldn't be here. And not only was the 91st Psalm my introduction to Yahowah, which he scribed, but you know, Dode is the lone individual who took the time to observe the Torah correctly and show us the way to God.
How it's done, yeah.
Yeah, how it's done. You know, which is to observe, to ponder, to come to understand, and then as a result of all of those things, to act upon what you've come to know.
It really gets down to what I figured out early is Shamar Torah and respond appropriately.
That's correct.
It's just that simple. I mean, he didn't ask you to jump through hoops.
Yeah, David was a very bad boy, hugely flawed, but he's called righteous, vindicated by God, because when it came to understanding and responding to what God had to say, he was right.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the story now in a more amplified form. The revealing communication, this is Chazon, the written prophetic record of the relationship agreement and the covenant contract, enabled by the ability to be perceptive and the vision from Chazah, to see and to perceive, to look intelligently, to observe and to understand. So it's really interesting. The word that Yahowah uses for prophecy happens to be very similar to the word that he uses to explain how to get to know him, by being observant.